welcome. I'm so excited to introduce my special guest today. We have with us Meredith Adams, who is the CEO of Cactus Girl Media. She is a messaging expert and brand storyteller. She spent 7 years in a multi-level marketing commercial cult and escaped in 2020. And now she's most recently launched Learn the Language That Sells, which is her program that helps mission-driven service providers learn how to talk about their offers so their ideal clients take action and buy, while radically simplifying their content marketing so they don't have to work more than 5 hours a day. Hi, Meredith. Thank you so much for joining
Hey,
us.
thank you for having me.
So, Meredith is one of my internet friends who became a real life friend and also has recently become a client, and we hang out in New York, and she's really freaking awesome. So I know this is going to be a great conversation, and you're going to learn a lot from her. So I'm excited to dive in. But before we do, Meredith, tell us, like, how did you end up? What's your story? How did you end up doing this work that you're doing now?
It's been a journey. So going back, like way back, I moved to New York City from Texas in 2012, and that was when I was 26 years old, and that was when I got my start in entrepreneurship. I opened up a company doing food and tasting tours in covering all of the ethnic enclaves all over New York City. So like Brighton Beach is a Ukrainian neighborhood. Chinatown, obviously, like in Manhattan, and we have another Chinatown in Queens that's growing. I live in Queens, and it was a lot of fun. And during that time too, like I worked for like other tour agencies and stuff like that. And I was just, really like out and about, seeing the sights and showing off and eating really good food every day. And I but it was hard. Like I was 26. I had no business background whatsoever. I just knew that I did not want to work in an office at all. Like I had come from like working for, I think at that point in my career, in my life, I'd had like two kind of major, like full-time, like post-college jobs. And I hated it. Like I hated the grind. Like I'm one of those people, I think they call it a wolf, is like your like sleeping pattern. And
Uh-huh.
like my mind comes alive after 5 p.m. So like it was just such a struggle every day to like function and like get there at a certain time. And I was just like, I didn't respect like the authority or the like hierarchical corporate structure the way that most people do. I was just like, why? Like, why? This is bullshit. Why should I just do what you say? Why should I have to be like, what happens at 8 o'clock in the morning that is like, if I'm a minute late, like what is the thing that happens? Like, I don't understand. Can you can you please explain it to me? um so I came up with this idea, and it was a like pretty like niche, like different thing to do. And I just started learning, and I came here and hit the ground running. And I didn't really know much about building a business. And at that time in 2012, like business coaching was not a thing. The internet was barely a thing, let's be honest. Social Instagram was very new, very niche. Like no one used Instagram. Like the world of marketing and advertising was completely different back then, and I did not know how to get the help I needed. I didn't even know how to I didn't even have the language to ask the questions that I needed to ask. So I was just kind of like out there, trying something. I felt like I was flailing, but looking back, I think that I was doing a lot of really cool stuff. And long story short, that all made me kind of, being in that vulnerable position made me a really good target for multi-level marketing. And that was unfortunately what I was sucked into for, and then spent the next 7 years really like wrestling with, do I want to do this? Do I want to be like these people? Do I want to go all in with this? Do I want to, and I really felt like I had my two separate lives, because they would encourage you to, like distance yourself from your family and friends. And I was like, fuck that, I'm not going to do that. And so I had like that version of myself, and then like the version of myself that showed up in our business meetings 3 to 4 times a week in person in New York City, on top of commuting back and forth to work. And so in 2016, I started a job at New York University, and it was, I had just gotten out of a not so great relationship, and it was still, it was a very soft place to land that job after a lot that had gone on in my life. And so I, really tried to build the business while working full time. And I would have people like come to my office and like go up on our rooftop deck and like show them business plans and stuff like that. I mean, I was really in it for a while, but then it became even harder because it was like, okay, I had my work life, my family and friend life, and then my business life, and it was hard to stay in, with all of those different worlds. And honestly, like I felt very held back, and like I'm a very creative person, and you cannot be creative and do network marketing. There's absolutely no room for that. It's just a copy and paste, say the same thing. But there are people out there right now copying and pasting their stupid like cold DM strategies.
People are receiving those, yeah.
Yeah, it's bad out there. But yeah, so in COVID, going like virtual really kind of like removed the curtain on what was actually going on. And there was kind of a mass exodus of a lot of people leaving my organization. And so, when I left and when I got out, I remember sitting in the park, and I was talking to a friend who was much higher up in the company than I was, and she had left, and the only reason I is because she started saying some shit about her uplines on Instagram, and I saw it, and I was like, the like wide-eyed emoji, like I sent her like 17 of those emojis, like, what is going on? What are you doing? Spill the tea. Because we were not allowed to say anything negative about our uplines ever. And so there she was, just like putting it all out there. And so she and I talked that day, and we just like sent a bunch of voice notes back and forth. And after, a couple of hours of that, I was like, yeah, I'm out, great. And I remember calling my mom and telling her that I was out, and she was like, oh, wow, that's like a big decision. Like, do you want to talk about it? And I was like, nope. I was like, I have spent the past 7 years trying to make sense of this and going over this in my mind. I just want to move the fuck on with my life. So, about 6 months later, the documentary on the Nexium cult came out, which was if you haven't seen it, The Vow on Stars is fantastic. And that was kind of like where my obsession with cults and scams began, and also my real understanding of my own story and what had happened to me, and really like the journey of reclaiming that story, because I was embarrassed, as like anyone would. It's a very normal feeling to have after going through something like that. And in the beginning, I leaned into, I have a degree in communications. I studied photography in college. I've written like since I was 7 years old was when I became, I decided to be a writer. And so I leaned into those talents, and I had to make extra money to, pay off debt and move forward and whatever. And so I leaned into those skills, but it was hard because I felt like I didn't really know anything. And to be honest, I really didn't. Like, I had been stagnant in my career for a long time. So I had a lot to learn and a lot to catch up on. And fortunately, working at NYU, I was able to get a degree in social media marketing, which really helped. But it was, I felt like I had to make up for lost time. And I definitely did that, and then some. But what it really was, like, that key thing that was missing, I think, was my reclaiming my story and what had happened to me and using that as something powerful. And now that story is such a big part of my messaging, and I love storytelling now. And part of it is why when I was in that MLM cult, we were not allowed to share our stories. You had to be like way high up in the business in order to just have any clout to even like for people even to listen to you, for them to even act like you mattered or your story mattered. And what I learned, in all of my like desensitizing or whatever, I can't think of the word for all of that, is that you have to use your story. That we all have stories. Every single one of us has a story that has value, and these stories matter. And then I started learning about storytelling and marketing, and oh my God, that is the best way to sell a product. There's these really cool statistics. I think it's that like if your audience connects with your brand story, people are 55% more likely to buy. And then of that 55%, like 15% are more likely to buy like on the spot, like right then. So it's really cool, and everyone should use their story, I think.
Yeah, I love it. It's so powerful. This is why, that's always the first question I ask my guests, because when we share who we are, it creates that instant connection and it really sets the context. And
Yeah.
there's always like a part of your story that other people will see themselves in. Like listening to your story about how you just like couldn't handle corporate life gave me a flashback to when I was like trying to move to Vancouver, and then my visa ran out. So I went back to the UK, and I wanted to keep working in film, but I was like, oh, like, basically whatever I could land was a 6-month internship at 20th Century Fox, which like I forced them to pay me at least my train fare, even though they were like, this is outrageous, like we never pay our interns. I'm like, you're outrageous. And I just remember like going to sit on the bench in the park in wherever it was in central London. I would just like cry at lunchtime, and I was just like, what's wrong with me? Like, everyone was just sat behind their computer screens, and I would walk over
Yeah.
where my team was to like have a dialogue. When I had a question, they would look at me like, why are you not writing this to me in an email? And I was just like, this is just destroying my soul.
Oh my
So
God.
I get it. Like some of us just aren't meant to work in offices. And I think also as writers too, right? Like what you said about reclaiming your story, and there's a lot of parts of our life where maybe we hold shame around it because culturally it isn't what we're supposed to be doing, or we didn't tick all the boxes, or everything didn't go perfectly to the plan that whoever else laid out for us. But when I look back on before I entered my writing phase, it's like, oh yeah, like I wouldn't be able to write in the way that I write if I hadn't lived, if I hadn't experienced like all of these diverse colors. And I think that's very similar as a coach. Like, whenever you start to help people with things, you always start to get the deep lessons in that, or like, get kicked into bigger challenges in that area so you can really master it, so that you have materials to be able to pass on and to teach people. So
absolutely.
I love this conversation. Our story is important, and I think it's really important to underscore that message. Like one thing, I realized that when I left England, because when in England, it's very like pack mentality. You're just surrounded by so many people all the time. It's such a tiny little island. And so, and I'm sure anyone else will resonate when you live where you are from, you think everyone's just like you. But as soon as you leave and you go somewhere different where people are not like you, and you see the way that they look at you, and, I went to Canada, they just love immigrants there, and they love people from different cultures, and they're so curious, and they really celebrate that. And everyone was like, who are you? Like, what's this funny accent coming out of your mouth? And I felt different. And I realized like, oh, like, and I was obviously interested in everyone else around me. And I know a lot of people don't feel like that because they feel like they're the same as everyone else. And we're all so different, and we're all so unique, even when we share things that are similar, like you and I help clients in very similar ways, but we're so different. I was just talking to another friend. We also, was like, we want to help women make money in their business. But the way that we do it and the personality that we bring and the unique values that we bring makes us so different that, either our clients are going to be very different or the clients will want to work with both of us at some time. So it kind of
For sure.
dissolves that like hierarchical way that we are, and that like competition and dog eat dog and like you stay in your place and don't like share information with the wrong people and stick to the script, and this whole, like you say, that way that we're kind of like can be indoctrinated into career and money, which I think, women rising in business and exploring new ways of doing things is just completely like rewriting the script on all of those things. So yeah, I would love to know, like, what was that process for you of starting to tap into your story in your business and the way that you're attracting clients now?
The first thing that comes to mind is I had already been sharing so I had this like whole, life change happen in 2020, like obviously right in the middle of COVID. And what I had been doing already was so going back a little bit before that, prior to COVID, in like the end of 2019, my coworker and I had this, we just both love clothes and like really into fashion, and we had this whole thing going of like, let's see how many days we can go without repeating an outfit. And we just took pictures of each other every day, and the pictures were nothing like, and just posted it in our stories, like just purely for fun, like, nothing gained, nothing, whatever. So then, and the pictures were not great. Like it was like, standing in front of the desk or whatever, but then they sent me to like work in another building for part of that time. And so I wasn't seeing her. And then I was still doing like the challenge and I was still like doing the photos, but I had to start like going to the park and like asking random strangers to take pictures and stuff like that. And so, but then I was like, and then people would say, oh, okay, like, sure. Like, yeah, you look so cute. I would love to take your picture. Like, where do you want it? And I'd be like, okay, let me like set up a stage in my mind. So I was, after a while, I thought, you know what, this is really hard. Like, I'm tired of like going up to these random people. And there's always that fear that like, what if they just like run off with your phone? So I invested in a $20 tripod on Amazon for my phone. And I started seeking out different locations like around the city. Like there's so many photography blogs and stuff that will show you where like, oh, like go to this place and they have like a pink wall with hearts on it or something. And I would be like, okay, pink wall with hearts, what am I going to wear? Let me put something together. And then after work, I'm going to go to this place and take pictures. And so that's what I was doing. And it was amazing. It was an amazing time to be doing shit like that because there was nobody around. The streets were empty. It was quiet. It was eerie how quiet it was. It was fucking fantastic. So, so that's what I had kind of been doing. And so I was like marketing myself without really marketing myself. And it was the girl that got me out of MLM that was like, you should monetize this. Like, I want us to continue to build businesses and achieve wealth and freedom and all of that. And I'm like, well, yeah, no shit, but like, you think I can do that for photography? And she was like, well, you got to start somewhere.
Hi loves, I wanted to let you know that I made a special free gift just for you. It's called the Cash Injection Ritual, and it's my 3-step method that you can use to create extra cash sales starting today. I used to suck at making consistent money, and I believed I would never be good at sales because I refused to do anything that feels out of integrity. Then I discovered the powerful mindset shifts I'm about to share with you, and I implemented this cash injection ritual to double my income 3 years in a row, making it to 6 figures in my dream coaching business. Now I'm so effing excited to share this work with you so you can start receiving the money you so deserve. So click the link in the description or go to withsarahmac.com and you can download the cash injection ritual from the freebies menu at the top of my page. Please remember to share your celebrations with me when the extra sales and cash starts to roll in. Before we get back to the episode, I have something exciting to tell you about. There were a couple of key things that changed everything in my life as an entrepreneur that allowed me to bring in six figures while working half as many hours and having more fun than ever before in my business. It was money mindset work around how I was doing business, combined with getting good at sharing strategic sales content online. I know you know that this is your year to start hitting your 10K month income goal and living the life of creative freedom and fulfillment you have been dreaming about. You're ready to be consistently attracting total dream soulmate clients through the creative content you're sharing on social media, and you want to be reaching more people, charging higher rates, and working much less. So I'm very excited to invite you to join me in Freedom Club, my mastermind, where you'll receive tailored high-level support to master the skills that will create your dream life and six-figure dream business starting now. With focused weekly trainings and coaching calls to find the clarity on your content that's going to make you the most money, to design a simple, fun launch strategy you'll enjoy following through on, plus daily support and feedback from me in the Voxer chat, you'll find that sweet spot in your business where you're the most confident in your work, having the most fun, and making the most money. Go to withsarahmac.com/freedom club to apply now. Now let's get back to the episode.
So I had been loosely marketing my photography online for a while and getting clients and like doing pretty well. I remember one weekend I made like $500 in one weekend, and I was like, holy shit, like this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. And it was like, you know, something fun that I enjoyed doing. So I think when it came time to share my story, I felt very vulnerable because I'm like, what I was doing so far was working, and I was starting to see how I could potentially like create something out of this. Would I ruin all of my credibility if people now find out that like I was in a cult? But I wanted to, what I really wanted to is so that my friend Michelle, who the girl who got me out, she was sharing her story all over, all the time, everywhere. And that was very scary. And there's a lot of scary stuff that can happen with these groups when you start speaking out against them. And she was really brave in doing that. And I had had so many like, you know, teary-eyed conversations with her, like, thank you so much for getting me out. And I felt like, well, I'm like, feel like a shitty person if I am, you know, leaning on her and like telling her how amazing she is and thank you for helping me and stuff if I'm not like actually speaking out against it. And so I remember one day, it was a Saturday, I think I was in my living room, and I was in my Instagram stories and I was like writing all this dramatic, like, I have something to say and it's not easy for me. And blah blah, and many of you might not know this side of me or know that I went through this, but blah blah blah, like I was really like confessing to a crime or something. And I was like, I was a part of this organization, and at that time I don't think that I had really like understood. I was just starting to understand that I was in a cult, and I was very uncomfortable with the word cult, but that I was like sobbing, and I was like, I just like, you know, it was really, really hard. But what was funny is that I finished it. Like I pressed, you know, upload on my last little like story that I created. And then I sat there, nothing fucking happened. And I was like, where did all this drama come from for nothing? So but it felt good. It felt good for me. I was like, okay, well, you know, I got that off my chest. And then, you know, the more that I started learning about high control groups and cults and stuff, it more, you know, like it kind of got exciting. Like that's a really fascinating subject that you can do a deep dive into. And I found more creators online that were talking. There's a big anti-MLM community and on Facebook, or I'm sorry, on YouTube. And there's a lot on Facebook as well. There's a lot of anti-MLM groups. And then it kind of spills over into like the true crime stuff. So there's a lot of podcasts. Like this was at that time kind of just starting to get noticed by like some of the true crime podcasts and stuff like that, especially with the Nexium case, because Keith Raniere had just been, I think in 2020, maybe it was 2021, somewhere around there. His trial had been going on and he was sentenced to, I think, 90 years in prison. So this stuff was like really coming into the cultural conversation, which was super exciting for me because I was like, hello, I was there. Let me tell you my story. I was in a cult. It was so exciting. Want to hear about it like firsthand. Like, this is what we did. So really it was just like, I think it was just getting over that initial like being scared and feeling vulnerable, getting to a point of really embodying with it to the point where like I am having so much fucking fun with this. And it helped too when other people that were part of the organization that I was in that had moved on earlier than I did started coming and telling me like, hey, like, I don't know if you remember me, like we went to a couple conferences together, and I'm like, yeah, of course I fucking remember you. Like, we spent like days together, like we worked together, like you were basically my coworker for like a year or however long, and they would say stuff like, I just moved on from this. I didn't really think about how it impacted me until I started reading your stuff, and you're helping me heal in ways that I didn't even know that I was wounded. And so that was very, very impactful. And I guess now the more that I'm so comfortable talking about this, like I don't think a day goes by where I don't talk about this, is that I really think there's something about leading with your own vulnerability and allowing other people that have not necessarily, were in a cult or a high control group or whatever, but maybe even just like an abusive relationship,
Yeah.
or, had like a narcissistic parent or upbringing or something like that. It's all the same trauma. And if we can capitalize, or not capitalize, if we can reclaim that and use that as part of our story and part of our success story, I mean, that's like the hero journey that like this country is like fucking founded on. Like, all
Yeah.
of those movies that like we watched growing up was always about some kind of like underdog person, beating all odds to, win the game or whatever. And that's what everyone loves. That everyone loves those stories.
Yeah, I think I talk about cults with my friends all the time.
Yeah.
I've had quite a few clients who have had cult-like experiences, and one of my best friends left Jehovah's Witnesses,
Yeah.
and it's interesting to me because I think it's definitely a hot topic in North America. I feel like that, I don't know, there's more space for people to just like go in. I know you lived in New York, so it's kind of different, but I know that like cult culture is like US is a hotbed for that. But
Oh
beyond
yeah.
that,
And and I think like it's like we could talk all day about like, QAnon and like there's so little like people have so little sense of like self and belonging here. They are very quick to jump into a group that accepts them.
right. And that's because the word cult, it's like culture is a cult. And I think, obviously there are cults where like, this is our cult, you come in, we close the doors and you don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
Like this is
You
these
can't sit
rules
with
in this
us.
house. But beyond that, the wider culture, particularly as women, like we're breaking out of the cults, the cult of like, you need to live life in a certain way. The cult of like,
Yeah.
this is valuable and this isn't valuable. The cult of this is who has the power and this is who doesn't have the power, right? So I think anyone who's drawn to coaching has been through some type of an experience like that. For me, it was, having a narcissistic abusive parent. Like for some people, it's having that in relationships. Like we've all experienced some flavor of like oppressive power in our culture, right? And obviously there's
Yeah.
like many different degrees of that. And I think the most important message that I think people can take away from this conversation is, maybe you didn't have a super dramatic story about leaving a cult or like an abusive relationship, but your humanness is really interesting and it's really valuable. And when you lead with that, like you said, when you lead with your vulnerability, when you lead with, especially as writers, as like leaders, as creative leaders, it's going to those edges where people haven't been having conversations and shining a light on the aspects of life that we felt friction around, that we've been coming up against, that we've, had to find a way to work through to create
Yeah.
what it is that we desire. Like that's the juicy point. So if you're listening to this and you're like, but my story isn't interesting enough, or I haven't struggled enough, or I haven't whatever enough.
Oh, I thought my story wasn't interesting enough for a long
Yeah,
time too.
everyone falls into that trap. So just knowing that it's really a process, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, like particularly for women, it's the one thing that we hold back on is sharing our story and sharing the details of our story, particularly when it comes to marketing and content. Is like, you'll be like, okay, I've got clear on the language to sell my offer, and I'm just going to completely omit who I am, my story, and what's unique about me, because like, this is what's more important. And it's like, no, lead with your story, lead with you, lead with your uniqueness, lead with your details, because that's, it's like that weird kind of counterintuitive magic of writing, where it's like the more specific you go into the details of your story and your specific situation, the more it becomes universally, people are able to connect to that and to see themselves in your story, even if they're very different and their story isn't necessarily similar to yours. So,
oh, absolutely. And sometimes having, like I think so I decided last year that I'm going to write a book about my experience. But one thing I kind of struggled with that was that, like, I mean, okay, if you go on YouTube or, other podcasts that talk about MLMs and stuff, like, let's be honest, like my story is pretty vanilla. I didn't lose my house. I didn't, like even in like my organization, they had people like they were arranging marriages and shit. Like it was fucking crazy. None of that happened to me. Like nothing really like particularly like bad happened to me. I wasn't, like Sarah Edmondson as Nexium, like she was physically held down and branded, like nothing physically violent or whatever. It was all this mental stuff. And earlier this year, I took a course on publishing, and I said, sometimes I just really wonder, like, what do I really have to say? Because who wants to hear when there's so many other like sensational, like big things happened, like I kind of wish that I'd been like forced into an arranged marriage or whatever. Then I'd have more to talk about. But my mentor said, I'm first of all, I'm glad that didn't happen to you because I care about you, and I'm glad that didn't happen. But secondly, don't you think that what happened to you is going to be more relatable to more people who maybe, touched on this organization or went to, 2 or 3 meetings or whatever and thought it was weird and are just like kind of curious about it more than this like sensationalized drama. Like, and at that point, it just kind of becomes more about you and what happened and not about the person that you are trying to help and connect with. It's like kind of like a celebrity status sort of thing. And that really has stuck with me in that, a lot of people will say like, oh yeah, my story isn't really that like, crazy. Like, I just, I got a divorce and then like he stalked me for like months, and it's like, you know, like in the grand scheme of like crazy divorces, that's not that bad. But not who of us have been like stalked like that. Like that's an interesting story that I want to hear.
I think headline of this conversation, everybody's story is interesting, and everybody has those thoughts of like, is my story interesting? So yes, it is. Lead with your story. So I could talk to you about this all day, but I do have to wrap it up. So please, can you let us know if anyone who's interested in learning more about you and your work, what have you got going on, and where can people find you?
Yeah, definitely. So I am cactusgirlmedia.com is my website, and I am on Instagram also at Cactus Girl Media. I'm on Facebook as well under Meredith Adams, but probably easier to find on Instagram. And like I said, I just dropped Learn the Language That Sells, which is a 90-day one-on-one program for mission-driven service providers to, learn how to talk about their offers in a way that actually results in sales and inspires their dream clients to take action and buy, while also simplifying their marketing process to where they don't have, you don't have to work more than 5 hours a day, which I think is everyone's goal in the entrepreneurship space. And that can be found on my website. If you go on my website, I have actually a free 2-day course talking about how I made $10,000 in my first ever high ticket offer, just coming straight out of being a copywriter to selling my offer. And, that was using all of that experience as a copywriter to like really understand how to speak about it and how to get those sales. So if you want to hear about that experience and gain some knowledge from there, I tell you exactly how I did it. Go to cactusgirlmedia.com. And if you click on courses, it will lead you directly to the free course.
Awesome. And send me the link and I'll make sure we put that in the description and show notes as well. So thank you so much, Meredith, for coming. Thank you everybody for listening. Please share this episode with anyone you know it will resonate with, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.
For more inspirational content, head over to my website withsarahmac.com and please support the show by liking, commenting, and subscribing.